Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to take a really fascinating journey to uncover the hidden, almost magical mechanics of the cash that you and I use every single day. We rarely stop to think about the physical money in our wallets or those digital numbers sitting in our bank accounts, but the underlying system that makes it all work, it is absolutely incredible.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. You reach into your pocket and you pull out a $20 bill. What is it actually worth? Sure, it's nice paper. It's got a high fiber content so it can survive a trip through the washing machine. But at the end of the day, it's still just a useless piece of paper with absolutely no intrinsic value. Literally, if you marched into the lobby of the Federal Reserve, waved it around and demanded some gold or silver in return, you'd get nothing but a very strange look from security. Yet somehow, you can take that exact same useless piece of paper into a grocery store and walk out with 3 pounds of chicken breast or a really nice bottle of wine.
So how exactly does that happen? Well, here is our roadmap for solving this macroeconomic mystery together. 1. The illusion of value. 2. Bizarre forms of money. 3. The 3 rules of money. 4. The power of trust. And 5. Inflation and poker chips.
All right, section 1, the illusion of value, the paradox in your pocket. Because honestly, it's a completely bizarre convention when you think about it, right? Swapping these seemingly powerless printed rectangles of paper for real, tangible goods that took actual time and energy to produce. To unpack this whole shebang, we're drawing directly from Charles Wheelan's brilliant and eye-opening book, Naked Money. Wheelan really pulls back the curtain on our financial system, and he shows us exactly how these pieces of paper acquire such immense value, and maybe more importantly, what happens when the people in charge get it terribly, terribly wrong. Let's move to section 2, bizarre forms of money. From the supreme leader to the Fed. Let's see how this builds, because to really wrap our heads around our own money, we kind of have to look at how different authorities around the world manipulate their paper currencies. Take North Korea back in 2009. The government decided, hey, we're going to issue a new currency, just lopping 2 zeros off their bills. But here was the catch. They strictly limited how much of the old currency regular citizens could swap for the new one. So, with the literal stroke of a pen, anyone holding large amounts of cash, whether that was black market traders or just ordinary people trying to avoid starvation, had their accumulated wealth completely wiped out, gone. Now contrast that massive destruction of wealth with the United States Federal Reserve during the 2008 financial crisis. To lower interest rates and inject some much-needed liquidity into a struggling economy, traders at the New York Fed essentially created new money out of absolutely nowhere. To put that into perspective, between January 2008 and January 2014, the Fed injected roughly $3 trillion of new money into the American economy. $3 trillion. Click, click, click. With just a few keystrokes on a computer, money that literally did not exist seconds earlier was instantly created and used to buy financial assets. So, North Korea destroyed money, and the US created it out of thin air, all because both currencies are fiat, meaning they have zero intrinsic value and they just exist because the government says so. But what if your money actually does have intrinsic value? Well, look at US prisons. Inmates obviously aren't allowed to carry cash. So after smoking was banned, they couldn't use cigarettes anymore, and they desperately needed a new currency. They ended up settling on the mac, which is a pouch of mackerel fish sold in the commissary for about $1. Now think about this. If the US economy ran on mackerel, the Fed couldn't just magically create millions of fish with a keyboard stroke. And a dictator couldn't just declare your savings worthless, because unlike paper, if push comes to shove, you can always just eat the mackerel. Let's jump to section 3, the 3 rules of money. The invisible architecture of finance. So the crucial point here is that whether we are talking about US dollars, North Korean won, or literally pouches of prison fish, every single functioning currency relies on an invisible architecture to survive. All money absolutely must perform 3 non-negotiable jobs to hold up a global or local economy. It has to be a unit of account, a store of value, and a medium of exchange. First up, a unit of account. You can kind of think of this as a universal translator. If a new job offered to pay you a salary of, say, 6 cattle and 11 crates of oranges every month, you'd have absolutely no idea if that was a good deal until you translated into a common unit, like dollars. Even today, as physical cash disappears and we're all just swiping our cards or tapping our phones, we still critically need that standard unit to mentally price our morning coffee.
Second, a store of value. This just means you can accept payment for a job today, put that payment away, and completely trust that it will still buy you things tomorrow. This is exactly why non-perishable items like salt or gold work best historically. I mean, you definitely wouldn't want to save up fresh, rotting fish for your retirement fund. And it's also exactly the function that the North Korean government so ruthlessly destroyed when they suddenly capped their currency swap, basically turning their people's life savings into useless scrap paper overnight.
And third, it has to be a medium of exchange. Our modern economies thrive because we all specialize in different jobs and then we trade with one another. Money simply makes that swapping process way easier. And as we've seen, your money doesn't actually need to have any intrinsic value to work as a medium of exchange. It just needs to be easily portable and widely accepted by everybody else. Which perfectly cues up Section 4, the power of trust, why fake money works and real money fails. Now, if money doesn't need intrinsic value, what actually gives it power? Ultimately, modern money is just a shared, incredibly fragile psychological belief. And this brilliantly illustrates that psychology. Let's look at India. By law, a torn or dirty rupee note is perfectly valid legal tender, so long as its serial numbers are intact. But if you try to spend it on the streets of Mumbai, it is universally rejected by taxi drivers and street vendors. Because nobody wants to get stuck holding it, nobody accepts it. It is real money rendered completely useless by a simple lack of trust. Now, on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, look at Somalia in the early 2000s. The central bank had totally collapsed. The government barely even existed. And yet the stateless Somali shilling, which legally speaking was equivalent to monopoly money and was sometimes even actively counterfeited, functioned perfectly for daily trade. But why? Simply because of deep underlying clan and kinship trust. People accepted it for one simple reason. They knew everyone else would accept it too. And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, Inflation and Poker Chips, the Goldilocks problem. Maintaining that incredible trust requires a super delicate Goldilocks balancing act by central banks, just to ensure that money is not too scarce, but definitely not too abundant either. Imagine you're at a poker game. You and your friends put real hard cash into a shoebox, and in return, you get plastic chips to play with. Now, throughout the night, those chips move all around the table. At the end, you trade them back in for the actual cash on the bucks. Pretty simple, right? But now, imagine your host starts secretly tossing hundreds of extra plastic chips onto the table during the game without adding a single dollar to the shoebox. What happens? By the end of the night, every single chip is worth less. Adding more chips to the table didn't magically create more wealth. It literally just diluted the value of the chips that were already there. And this perfectly illustrates what Nobel laureate Milton Friedman meant when he so famously said, "Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon." In our real economy, the cash in that shoebox represents actual goods and services. Food, cars, haircuts. The plastic chips, that's our fiat currency. If a central bank prints money faster than the economy creates actual goods, you just end up having to hand over way more money to get the exact same stuff. A really great, relatable example of this is airline frequent flyer miles. Over the years, airlines were awarding miles for absolutely everything: credit cards, hotel stays, car rentals. They printed these digital miles way, way faster than they actually added free seats on their airplanes. And the result? Classic inflation. The price of a free flight completely skyrocketed, suddenly requiring tens of thousands of more miles than it used to. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens when a government treats its actual national currency like airline miles. In Zimbabwe, the government printed new money so recklessly that on July 4th, 2008, a single beer in the capital city cost 100 billion Zimbabwean dollars. 100 billion. And just 1 hour later, that exact same beer cost 150 billion. This right here is the ultimate tragic endgame of breaking the fundamental rules of fiat currency. Inflation reached a staggering 80 billion% a month. The money became so utterly worthless that businesses literally had to put up signs begging people not to use the national currency as toilet paper, because the physical paper it was printed on was actually worth more than the face value of the bill. When that delicate balance is broken, the trust evaporates entirely. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. We've seen today that money is basically just an illusion powered by mutual belief, and it's tightly managed by these invisible rules. Knowing how quickly that trust can vanish, just how fragile is the belief holding up those digital numbers sitting in your very own bank account right now? It really makes you see the world of everyday money in an entirely new, naked light, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the truly fascinating mechanics of money.